The conference hall of the Galactic Trade Summit stretched across 3 floors, its transparent walls offering a view of the purple nebula that bathed the station in ethereal light. Ambassador Chen Wei stood near the back wall, her small frame barely noticeable among the towering delegates from across the galaxy. She wore a simple gray suit, her black hair pulled into a neat bun, her hands clasped behind her back. While other delegates argued and postured at the central platform, she remained still, watching everything with dark, calm eyes. The Krethian ambassador, a creature standing nearly 3 meters tall with crystalline skin that reflected the room's lights, slammed his forearms against the podium. His voice boomed through the translation devices embedded in every delegate's ear. Humanity requests mining rights in the outer spiral sectors. The same species that only joined the galactic community 2 decades ago? This is absurd. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Vexian delegate, whose serpentine body coiled around a hovering platform, added her voice to the chorus. The humans have no military presence worth mentioning. No fleet capable of defending those territories. They would be inviting pirate raids and border conflicts. It would destabilize the entire region. Ambassador Chen did not move. She did not raise her hand to speak or step forward to defend her species' proposal. She simply stood there, her expression neutral, her breathing steady. To the other delegates, her silence seemed like exactly what they expected from humanity. A young species, overwhelmed by the politics of civilizations that had traversed the stars for millennia. The Dorvian representative, a being composed of floating geometric shapes that shifted colors with his emotions, flickered orange with contempt. Perhaps the human delegation realizes the foolishness of their request. See how their ambassador does not even attempt to defend it. They know they are outmatched here. Laughter echoed through the chamber, not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from beings who see themselves as patient teachers dealing with naive students. They had seen species like humanity before, eager, ambitious, but lacking the strength to back their ambitions. In the galaxy's long history, such species either learned their place or faded into obscurity. Ambassador Chen's assistant, a young man named David Park, stood beside her with clenched fists. He leaned close and whispered urgently, "Ambassador, we need to respond. They're making us look weak. Say something. Defend our position." Chen's eyes never left the assembly floor. Her voice when she spoke was barely above a whisper. Not yet. Park's frustration was visible, but he knew better than to argue further. He had worked with Ambassador Chen for 3 years, ever since humanity's initial contact with the Galactic Council. In that time, he had learned that she operated on a different wavelength than most diplomats. While others used volume and aggression to make their points, she used something else entirely, something he still did not fully understand. The Krethian ambassador continued his speech, his confidence growing with each passing moment of human silence. The outer spiral sectors are rich in resources, yes, but they are also bordered by the contested zones. Any species claiming those territories must be able to defend them. Humanity has shown us exploration vessels and trade ships, but where is their military? Where are the fleets that would protect these mining operations? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every eye in the chamber turned toward the human delegation, toward Ambassador Chen specifically. This was the moment where tradition demanded a response, where diplomatic protocol required her to outline humanity's military capabilities or concede the weakness of their position. Chen remained motionless. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, then 10, then 15. The other delegates began to shift uncomfortably. Was the human ambassador so unprepared that she had no answer? Had humanity truly submitted a proposal without any military backing? The Vexian delegate's scales rippled with what the translation devices interpreted as amusement. It appears we have our answer, colleagues. The humans cannot defend these territories because they have nothing to defend them with. I move that we table this proposal indefinitely and move to more serious matters. Calls of agreement filled the chamber. The Dorvian's geometric shapes pulsed with satisfied blue light. The Krethian ambassador raised 2 of his forearms in a gesture of finality. Park leaned toward Chen again, his whisper more urgent. "Ambassador, please. We're losing this. We need to—" "Watch," Chen interrupted softly. Her lips curved into the slightest hint of a smile. "Wait 30 seconds. Park fell silent, confused but obedient. He counted the seconds in his head. watching as the Vexian delegate prepared to formally submit her motion to table the proposal. 28 seconds, 29 seconds, 30. The chamber's communication system chimed, a sound reserved only for emergency broadcasts or messages from the Galactic Council's highest authorities. Every delegate froze. Emergency broadcasts were rare, used only for events of significant importance. The holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing the aged face of Council Prelate Thon, a member of the ancient Archeon species that had founded the Galactic Council itself. His expression was grave. "Delegates, I apologize for interrupting your session." Prelate Thon's voice carried the weight of centuries. "However, a situation has developed that requires immediate council awareness. Approximately 40 minutes ago, a fleet of Kragoth warships entered the demilitarized buffer zone near the Rigel cluster. The Kragoth have issued no communication and have ignored all hails. Their trajectory suggests an intent to breach council space." Panic erupted in the chamber. The Kragoth were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors, a species that respected only military might. They had been quiet for 50 years, rebuilding after their last conflict with the Council's peacekeeping forces. If they were moving again, it meant war. The Crethean ambassador's crystalline skin dulled with fear. "How many ships?" "Preliminary scans indicate a battle fleet of 200 vessels, including 3 command dreadnoughts." Prelate Thon's words landed like hammer blows. Throughout the chamber, delegates began frantically accessing their personal communication devices, contacting their homeworlds, preparing for what this news meant. A Kragoth invasion would require a massive military response, one that would draw resources from every member species of the Council. In the chaos, no one noticed that Ambassador Chen had finally moved. She stepped forward, her hand reaching for her own communication device. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, entering a series of commands that had been prepared long before this summit began. Park watched her, his confusion deepening. "Ambassador, what are you doing?" Chen looked up at him, and for the first time that day her expression changed. The careful neutrality vanished, replaced by something sharp and purposeful, the look of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "I am," she said quietly, "issuing orders." The words made no sense to Park. Orders? Orders to whom? Humanity had sent a small diplomatic escort to the summit, 3 light cruisers at most. What orders could possibly matter in the face of 200 Kragoth warships? But Ambassador Chen was not looking at Park anymore. She was looking at the holographic display, where Prelate Thon was continuing to brief the assembly on the Kragoth threat. And she was smiling, not with joy but with the grim satisfaction of a chess player who had just seen 20 moves ahead. "Tell me, David," she said softly, still watching the display. "Do you know why I have been silent today?" Park shook his head mutely. "Because," Chen replied, "sometimes the most important statements are made without words, and sometimes the best time to speak is when everyone else has finally learned to listen." On her communication device, a message appeared in response to her commands, 3 words in military code that only she could see. "Standing by, Admiral." "Admiral." The word echoed in Park's mind. But Ambassador Chen was a diplomat, not a military officer. Unless... His eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. But before he could voice his realization, the chamber's emergency system chimed again and everything changed. The second emergency chime brought absolute silence to the conference hall. Even the panicking delegates froze, their attention snapping back to the holographic display where Prelate Thon's expression had shifted from grave to bewildered. "Delegates," the ancient Archeon's voice carried a note of confusion that unsettled everyone who heard it. "We have received unexpected telemetry data. Multiple energy signatures have appeared in the space surrounding the Kragoth fleet. The signatures are massive. We are still attempting to identify their origin." The Crethean ambassador's voice cracked with stress. "How many signatures, Prelate?" There was a pause, and for a moment the only sound in the chamber was the soft hum of the station's life support systems. When Prelate Thon spoke again, his words came slowly, as if he needed to verify them multiple times before giving them voice. "Over 300 discrete signatures. Warship class. They appeared without warning. No jump gate flashes, no subspace distortions that our sensors detected. They are simply there, positioned in a perfect tactical formation around the Kragoth fleet. The chamber erupted again, but this time the panic had a different flavor. 300 warships appearing from nowhere. No technology in the known galaxy allowed for such movement without detectable signatures. Even the most advanced civilizations left traces when moving large vessels through space. The Vexian delegates' scales had turned a pale, frightened yellow. What species? Which civilization has deployed them? Ambassador Chen took 3 steps forward, her footfalls silent on the polished floor. Every movement was measured, controlled, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. She reached the central platform and placed her hand on the communication panel, her diplomatic credentials automatically granting her access to address the assembly. Her voice, when it came through the speakers, was calm and clear, no longer the whisper she had maintained all day. The ships are human, Prelate Thon. They belong to the Earth Defense Coordination Fleet. I believe you will find their transponder signals are now coming online. The silence that followed her words was absolute. Park stared at his superior with his mouth open. The Earth Defense Coordination Fleet? Earth had a defensive fleet, certainly. Every member species maintained home system defenses. But 300 warships? Humanity had joined the Galactic Council 20 years ago with a handful of exploration vessels and trade ships. The Council's own intelligence had assessed human military capability as minimal, perhaps 24 combat-capable vessels at most. The Krathian ambassador found his voice first, though it trembled with disbelief. Impossible. We have intelligence on every member species' military capabilities. Humanity has never demonstrated such a fleet. We would have known. Chen's expression remained neutral, but there was something in her eyes now, something hard and measuring. With respect, Ambassador, you have intelligence on what humanity chose to show you. We are very good at showing people what we want them to see. Prelate Thon's image flickered as new data streamed to his console. His ancient eyes widened, an expression Park had never seen on an Archeon face. Ambassador Chen, our sensors are confirming your statement. 347 human vessels, to be precise. The ship classifications are unlike anything in our databases. Several of the larger vessels are reading energy signatures comparable to Council dreadnoughts. The Dorvian delegate's geometric shape spun rapidly, flashing red with what could only be anger or fear. This is a violation of Council protocols. All member species must register their military assets with the central database. Humanity has concealed a fleet of this size for 2 decades? Not concealed, Chen corrected gently. We simply never lied about something we were never asked to fully disclose. When humanity joined the Council, we submitted documentation of our home system defense fleet, 12 vessels, all accounted for. The Council never asked about forces deployed outside the Sol system. We never volunteered that information. The weight of her words settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. She was technically correct. The Council's protocols required registration of defensive forces within member systems, but had been written in an era when most species' military capabilities were centralized. The possibility that a young species might have extensive forces deployed in deep space, beyond the Council's scanning range, had never been seriously considered. Park's mind raced, connecting pieces he had never understood before. Ambassador Chen's previous assignments, 3 years as an observer in the contested zones, 2 years liaising with the Council's Military Coordination Bureau, 5 years before that in positions that were vaguely described in public records. Her military bearing that he had attributed to simple discipline, the way she analyzed situations with tactical precision. You were never just a diplomat, he whispered, though no one but Chen could hear him. Her eyes flicked to him briefly, and she gave the smallest nod before returning her attention to the assembly. The Vexian delegate had recovered enough to mount a challenge. Even if this is true, Ambassador Chen, the presence of human warships does not necessarily mean they are combat effective. Size and number mean nothing against a force like the Kragoth. They have been conquering worlds for 3 millennia. What experience does humanity have in actual warfare? The question hung in the air, and Park saw several delegates lean forward, eager for the answer. This was the crux of the matter. Humanity was known as a species of explorers and traders, not warriors. They had arrived in the galactic community peacefully, had engaged in diplomacy rather than conflict. Where would they have gained the experience to face something like the Kragoth? Ambassador Chen was quiet for a moment, and Park recognized the expression on her face. She was deciding how much truth to reveal, weighing the political consequences of her next words. Humanity has been engaged in warfare, she said slowly, for our entire recorded history. When we achieved spaceflight, we brought that experience with us. Before we encountered the Galactic Council, we spent 15 years dealing with threats in our own region of space. Pirates, rogue artificial intelligence remnants from our own conflicts, and territorial disputes with 2 other pre-council species in our local sector. We learned very quickly that the galaxy is not a safe place. She tapped her communication device, and a new holographic display materialized above the central platform. It showed a map of space around Earth's solar system, with dozens of markers, indicating battles and engagements that had never been reported to the Council. The Kragoth are dangerous, Chen continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. But they are not unique. Humanity has been fighting our own battles while you debated whether we were worthy of mining rights. We have adapted, evolved, and built a military doctrine based on a very simple principle. Never let anyone see your full strength until the moment you need to use it. The Krethian ambassador's crystalline skin was now flickering with colors that indicated rapid calculation and reassessment. You intentionally appeared weak. You let us believe you were helpless. We appeared as we needed to appear, Chen replied. In diplomacy, perceptions matter more than facts. If the Council had known humanity possessed a significant military force, how would you have treated us? Would you have welcomed us as partners, or feared us as threats? No one answered, but the silence was answer enough. The galaxy's history was filled with species that had been isolated or subjugated because they appeared too powerful, too dangerous. Humanity had studied that history well. Prelate Thon's voice drew everyone's attention back to the holographic display. Ambassador Chen, the Kragoth fleet is altering course. They are moving toward the human vessels. It appears they intend to engage. Yes, Chen said simply. I expected they would. The casual nature of her response sent ripples of shock through the assembly. She had expected a confrontation with the Kragoth. Had humanity somehow anticipated this invasion? Park's hands trembled slightly as another piece fell into place. The timing of humanity's proposal for mining rights in the outer spiral sectors, the location of those sectors bordering the contested zones, the zones where Kragoth activity had been reported with increasing frequency over the past months. You knew they were coming, he said aloud, forgetting for a moment that he was surrounded by the galaxy's most powerful delegates. Chen glanced at him again, and this time there was something almost apologetic in her expression. We had strong intelligence suggesting it, yes. The Kragoth have been probing Council defenses for a year. It was only a matter of time before they made a serious move. Humanity decided to be in position when they did. The Dorvian delegates' shapes were now spinning so rapidly they blurred together. This is madness. You are using the Council as bait, drawing the Kragoth to this location where your fleet happened to be waiting. Not bait, Chen corrected firmly. But we did choose to position our assets where they would be most useful when the Kragoth made their inevitable move. Would you have preferred we stood by and let them rampage through Council space unopposed? The question silenced the Dorvian. Whatever humanity's methods, the fact remained that 300 human warships were now the only thing standing between the Kragoth invasion force and the heart of Council territory. Prelate Thon's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. Ambassador Chen, I am receiving a communication request from the lead human vessel. The sender identifies as Fleet Admiral Morrison. Should I connect this channel to the assembly? Ambassador Chen straightened, and for the first time since Park had met her, he saw her smile. Not a diplomatic smile, but something genuine and fierce. Yes, Prelate. I think it is time the Council met humanity's real negotiators. The holographic display shifted and a new face appeared. Fleet Admiral Sarah Morrison looked like she had been carved from stone. Gray hair cropped military short, eyes that had seen too many battles, a scar running down one side of her jaw. She wore a black uniform with silver insignia that meant nothing to the assembled delegates. but everything to those who understood military hierarchy. When she spoke, her voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had commanded fleets in the darkness between stars. Galactic Council delegates, this is Fleet Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Coordination Fleet. We are moving to intercept the Kragoth invasion force. What happens next depends on them. The message was simple, direct, and utterly without compromise. Park watched as the reality of the situation finally registered on every delegate's face. Humanity had not been silent because they were afraid. They had been silent because they were waiting for exactly this moment, the holographic, tactical display floating above the conference hall's central platform showed a sight that would be analyzed by military strategists for decades to come. Two fleets faced each other across the black void, the Kragoth Armada in crimson markers, the human fleet in blue. Between them stretched approximately 2 million kilometers of empty space, a distance that modern weapons could cross in minutes. Fleet Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the EDCF Indomitable, humanity's command dreadnought. Behind her, dozens of crew members worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft chirping of computers and the occasional whispered communication between stations. Morrison had trained her people well. No unnecessary chatter. No wasted movement, every action purposeful. Tactical. Report. Morrison's voice was level, conversational even, as if she were discussing weather rather than an imminent battle with one of the galaxy's most feared military powers. A young officer with lieutenant bars on his collar responded immediately. Kragoth fleet maintaining formation, Admiral. Their energy signatures indicate weapons charging. Estimate they will be in optimal firing range in 4 minutes. Morrison nodded once. Communications, broadcast on all standard frequencies, Kragoth and Council bands. Channel open, Admiral. Morrison clasped her hands behind her back and spoke clearly into the pickup. Kragoth Fleet Commander. This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Morrison of the Earth Defense Coordination Fleet. You are approaching Council-protected space with an armed military force. Power down your weapons systems and state your intentions, or we will interpret your actions as hostile and respond accordingly. In the conference hall, the assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as Morrison's message transmitted across space. The Krethian ambassador leaned toward his aide, whispering urgently, 200 Kragoth warships against 300 human vessels. The numbers favor humanity, but barely. And the Kragoth have never lost a major engagement. Their tactics, their weapons, they are proven against the galaxy's best military forces. The Vexian delegate overheard and added her own whispered observation. The humans have never fought a battle of this scale in front of witnesses. If they fail here, their secret fleet means nothing. They will have revealed their strength and demonstrated its inadequacy in one move. But Ambassador Chen, still standing near the central platform, showed no concern. She watched the tactical display with the calm attention of someone reading a familiar book. Park stood beside her, his earlier shock giving way to a desperate need to understand what was happening. Ambassador, he whispered, even if our fleet is strong, the Kragoth have centuries of military experience. They have crushed species that had numerical superiority. How can you be so certain we will prevail? Chen did not look away from the display. David, how long have you studied galactic military history? 3 years as part of my diplomatic training. Then tell me, what is the common factor in every major Kragoth victory? Park thought back to his studies, recalling battles that had become legendary. They use overwhelming force against specific targets. They isolate enemy formations and destroy them piece by piece. They never retreat, which forces their opponents into extended engagements that favor Kragoth endurance. Correct, Chen said. Now tell me what humanity is best known for in our own historical military conflicts. Park opened his mouth, then closed it. Humanity's military history before joining the Galactic Council was not widely studied by other species. It was considered too primitive, too bound to a single planet's conflicts to be relevant to modern space warfare. But Park had read some of it out of personal interest in his own species' past. Adaptability, he said slowly. Human military doctrine emphasized adapting to opponents' strengths and finding unexpected countermeasures. But that was before space combat, before technology on this scale. Technology scales, Chen replied. Principles do not change, watch. On the tactical display, the Kragoth fleet began to move. The crimson markers separated into 3 distinct formations, each group angling to approach the human fleet from different vectors. It was a classic Kragoth maneuver: divide to force the enemy to split their defenses, then concentrate fire on whichever group proved weakest. The Dorvian delegates' geometric shapes pulsed with agitated orange light. The humans must respond. If they allow the Kragoth to complete that encirclement maneuver, they will be fighting on 3 fronts simultaneously. But the blue markers representing the human fleet did not move. They maintained their position, holding formation as the Kragoth ships maneuvered around them. To any observer with military training, it looked like a fatal tactical error. The first rule of space combat was to maintain maneuverability, to never allow yourself to be surrounded. Aboard the Indomitable, Morrison watched her tactical display with the same calm expression she had worn since the engagement began. Her tactical officer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Admiral, the Kragoth are completing their encirclement. Recommend we execute evasive maneuvers." "Negative," Morrison said. "All ships maintain current position. Weapons hold at standby." The tactical officer hesitated, then spoke the words that protocol required him to say. "Admiral, with respect, if we remain stationary, we are allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement." Morrison finally turned to look at her officer, and there was something in her smile that made him fall silent. "Lieutenant, who told you we were stationary?" On the tactical display, the blue markers remained motionless. But at Morrison's station, a secondary display showed additional data, information that the conference hall's observers could not see. The human ships were not stationary at all. Each vessel was making constant micro-adjustments to its position, tiny movements that kept them in perfect formation while maintaining maximum tactical flexibility. More importantly, beneath each blue marker, a small green indicator pulsed steadily. Jump drives charged and ready. The Kragoth fleet completed its maneuver, forming a sphere around the human position with roughly 60 ships in each of 3 groups. For a moment, everything hung in perfect stillness. Then as one, every Kragoth vessel opened fire. The conference hall gasped. The tactical display lit up with weapons fire streaming toward the human fleet from 3 directions simultaneously. Plasma cannons, kinetic missiles, directed energy beams, every weapon in the Kragoth arsenal unleashed in a coordinated first strike designed to overwhelm and destroy. But the blue markers were already moving. "Jump sequence execute," Morrison said calmly. "All ships, pattern Sierra 7. The human fleet vanished. For 3 seconds, the tactical display showed only crimson markers and the empty space where the human ships had been. Kragoth weapons fire passed through empty vacuum, missing their targets entirely. The Kragoth fleet hung in space, suddenly shooting at nothing. Then the human ships reappeared, but they were no longer surrounded. Instead, they had performed a synchronized micro-jump, moving in a single instant to new positions behind the Kragoth fleet. The 3 enemy formations were now between the human ships and their original position, perfectly bracketed, with human vessels positioned to fire on their less protected aft sections. "All ships," Morrison said, her voice carrying across every human bridge simultaneously. "Target assigned vessels. Fire when ready." The human fleet opened fire as one. 347 warships unleashed their weapons in a coordinated barrage that had been planned to the millisecond. Unlike the Kragoth's overwhelming spray of fire, each human ship targeted a specific enemy vessel with specific weapons designed to exploit known Kragoth defensive weaknesses. The result was devastating. 23. Kragoth ships exploded in the first 5 seconds. Another 47 suffered critical damage, their shields overloaded by the precisely coordinated fire. The Kragoth formation, so confident moments before, dissolved into chaos as ships broke pattern trying to respond to threats that were now coming from entirely unexpected moments before, dissolved into chaos as ships broke pattern trying to respond to threats that were now coming from entirely unexpected directions. In the conference hall, the assembled delegates stared at the tactical display in complete shock. The Krethian ambassador's crystalline skin had gone completely transparent, a sign of profound disorientation in his species. The Vexian delegate's scales rippled through a dozen colors in rapid succession, unable to settle on a single emotional state. "They jumped," the Dorvian delegate said, his voice barely audible through his translator. "They jumped an entire fleet in perfect coordination. The calculations required, the precision, it should be impossible." Ambassador Chen allowed herself a small smile. Humanity has been practicing coordinated fleet jumps for 12 years. We knew conventional tactics would be insufficient against opponents with centuries of combat experience, so we developed unconventional ones. Park stared at the display as the battle continued to unfold. The Kragoth were not broken yet. They were a resilient species trained to adapt to setbacks. Already their formations were reorganizing, ships moving to present their stronger forward shields to the human fleet. But the damage was done. The psychological advantage had shifted completely. Morrison is not trying to destroy them, Park realized suddenly. She is showing them they cannot win. Precisely, Chen confirmed. Watch what happens next. On the tactical display, the human fleet began another synchronized movement, but this time they did not jump. Instead, they shifted into a new formation, one that placed their heavy dreadnoughts in front, shields overlapping to create an impenetrable wall, while smaller cruisers and destroyers positioned themselves for flanking fire. It was a defensive posture, but one that clearly communicated a message. The human fleet could attack or defend as needed, adapting instantly to whatever the Kragoth attempted. The Kragoth fleet paused. For the first time in living galactic memory, a Kragoth military force hesitated in the face of an opponent. Morrison's voice came through the conference hall's speakers again, this time addressing the Kragoth directly. Kragoth Commander, you have now witnessed human military capability. Your fleet has taken significant damage. Mine has taken none. You are deep in council space, far from your supply lines and reinforcements. I am prepared to continue this engagement until your fleet is completely destroyed. She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. However, I am authorized to offer an alternative. Power down your weapons. Accept council escort to neutral space. Leave this region and do not return. In exchange, we will allow your ships to withdraw intact. You and your crews will live to fight another day. This offer expires in 60 seconds. The conference hall exploded into argument. The Crethean ambassador shouted about the precedent this would set. The Vexian delegate insisted that letting the Kragoth withdraw was a sign of weakness. Others joined the chorus, each with their own opinion about what should happen next. Ambassador Chen raised her hand, and somehow, despite the chaos, the gesture commanded attention. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly over the noise. The Kragoth are warriors, but they are not fools. They understand when they have been outmaneuvered. Destroying their fleet accomplishes nothing except creating martyrs and guaranteeing future conflict. Allowing them to withdraw demonstrates strength, not weakness. It shows that humanity can defeat them, and shows that we choose to be merciful when victory is certain. Prelate Thon, who had remained silent throughout the battle, finally spoke. His ancient voice carried approval. Ambassador Chen speaks wisdom. Mercy from a position of strength is the mark of a mature civilization. On the tactical display, the Kragoth fleet's weapon signatures began powering. The Kragoth fleet commander's face appeared on the holographic display for the first time. His species was formidable to behold, thick armored plates covering most of his body, eyes that glowed with internal heat, mandibles that clicked together when he spoke. The translator rendered his words with a gravelly tone that matched his appearance. I am War Commander Thraktal of the Kragoth 1st Expeditionary Force. Each word seemed to cost him something. We acknowledge your terms, Human Admiral. Our weapons are powering down. Morrison's expression did not change, but those who knew her well would have recognized the slight relaxation around her eyes. Satisfaction, but not triumph. War Commander, you will maintain your current position while Council peacekeeping vessels arrive to escort your fleet to neutral territory. Any deviation from this agreement will result in immediate resumption of hostilities. Is this understood? It is understood. Thraktal paused, his mandibles working silently for a moment before he continued. I must know, Admiral Morrison, how long has your species been preparing for this encounter? Morrison considered the question, weighing what to reveal. Humanity has been preparing to defend itself since the day we looked up at the stars and realized we were not alone in the universe. The specific preparations for facing a force like yours? Approximately 15 years. The Kragoth commander's eyes glowed brighter, a sign of respect in his species. 15 years to develop tactics that defeated a strategy perfected over millennia. Your species learns quickly, Admiral. This is noted. The transmission ended and the conference hall remained silent. Park looked at Ambassador Chen with new eyes, seeing past the diplomat to the strategic mind beneath. 15 years. That meant humanity had begun, developing tactics specifically for facing the Kragoth before they had even made official contact with the Galactic Council. The Krethian ambassador was the first to break the silence, his voice subdued. Ambassador Chen, I believe I speak for many here when I say that humanity's presentation today has been illuminating. We have clearly misjudged your species' capabilities. Chen inclined her head slightly, accepting the implicit apology. It was an understandable mistake, Ambassador. Humanity chose to be underestimated. We found it strategically advantageous to be seen as newcomers still finding our place, rather than as a potential military power that might threaten the Council's established order. The Vexian delegates' scales had settled into a thoughtful silver color. You manipulated us. Every interaction, every diplomatic engagement over the past 20 years, you were presenting a carefully crafted image. Not manipulation, Chen corrected gently. Strategic positioning. There is a difference. We never lied about our military strength. We simply allowed the Council to draw conclusions based on incomplete information. When asked directly, we provided accurate data. We just were never asked the right questions. Prelate Thon's holographic image shifted, his ancient features showing an emotion that might have been amusement. A lesson for the Council, it seems. We have grown complacent in our assumptions about younger species. Ambassador Chen, I suspect your proposal for mining rights in the outer spiral sectors was never truly about mining, was it? Chen's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. The mining rights would be beneficial to humanity, certainly. But the primary purpose was to force a Council discussion about territorial defense. While positioning our fleet in the region where we anticipated Kragoth activity, we needed to be taken seriously as a military power, but we needed the right context for that revelation. Today provided that context. Park's mind was racing, connecting implications he had missed before. The entire summit was theater, he said, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and disbelief. Your silence during the debates letting them mock our position. It was all calculated to set up this moment. Not entirely theater, Chen replied. The debates were real, the positions genuine. But yes, I knew that actions would speak louder than any arguments I could make. Better to show strength when it mattered than to spend political capital arguing in a forum where words would be dismissed. The Dorvian delegates, geometric shapes had stabilized into a steady blue. Pattern, acceptance, perhaps even respect. You have changed the balance of power in this Council, Ambassador. Whether you intended to or not, humanity is now recognized as a military force comparable to the oldest civilizations. This will have consequences. I am aware, Chen said, which is why I would like to address those consequences now. While the Council is assembled and recent events are fresh in everyone's mind. She stepped fully into the center of the platform, commanding the space with a presence that had been hidden all day behind careful neutrality. Park realized that this was who Ambassador Chen truly was. Not the quiet observer in the back of the room, but the figure standing at the center, reshaping galactic politics with every word. The Galactic Council was founded on principles of cooperation and mutual defense, Chen began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. For millennia, these principles have served the galaxy well. But today has exposed a fundamental weakness in the current system. The Kragoth were able to assemble a fleet of 200 warships and approach Council space without any effective early warning system. Your defensive response time would have been measured in hours or days, far too slow to prevent significant damage. The assembled delegates shifted uncomfortably. She was right, and they knew it. The Council's peacekeeping forces were powerful, but they were spread across thousands of systems, concentrating enough force to counter a threat like Down. 3 hours after the Kragoth fleet began its escorted withdrawal, Ambassador Chen stood in a small observation room adjacent to the main conference hall. The chamber's transparent walls offered an unobstructed view of the purple nebula that dominated this region of space, its swirling gases casting shifting shadows across the station's interior. She held a cup of tea, real earth-grown tea, a luxury she allowed herself only on significant occasions. The door behind her opened with a soft hiss. She did not turn, already knowing who would enter by the pattern of footsteps. Admiral Morrison, she said, raising her cup in greeting. I expected you would want to debrief in person, rather than through encrypted channels. Fleet Admiral Sarah Morrison moved to stand beside Chen at the window. Her own posture relaxed now that the immediate crisis had passed. She wore the same black uniform she had worn during the engagement, though she had removed the tactical vest that held her command interface. The Kragoth withdrawal is proceeding smoothly. War Commander Thraktal has been surprisingly cooperative. He is a warrior, not a fanatic, Chen replied. He knows when he has been beaten fairly. The Kragoth respect strength, and we demonstrated ours decisively. Morrison nodded, sipping from her own cup. Coffee, strong and black. The crew performed flawlessly. 15 years of training exercises paid off. That synchronized jump sequence we executed was textbook perfect. Not a single ship off position by more than 3 meters. I watched the tactical analysis, Chen said. Your people are exceptional, Sarah. But then we both knew they would be. You have been preparing them for this moment since the day we first detected Kragoth scout ships probing the contested zones. There was a comfortable silence between them, the kind that only develops between individuals who have worked together toward a common goal for many years. Finally, Morrison spoke again, her voice carrying a weight that had not been there before. Wei, we need to talk about what happens next. Today was a victory, yes, but it has exposed our full hand to the Council. Every major power in the galaxy now knows that humanity has a fleet capable of matching their own. That changes everything. Chen turned to face her old friend. They had served together during humanity's first encounters with hostile forces beyond Earth's solar system, back when Morrison had been a captain and Chen a junior intelligence officer. They had risen through their respective chains of command together, always with this day in mind, the day when humanity would reveal its true capabilities to the galaxy. You are worried about the consequences, Chen observed. I am worried about being seen as a threat rather than an ally, Morrison clarified. The Distributed Defense Initiative is a good framework, but some species will interpret our proposal as an attempt to dominate galactic military affairs. The Krethians are already calculating how this changes the power balance. The Dorvians will lobby for restrictions on fleet movements. We may have won a battle today, but the political war is just beginning. Chen set down her teacup and gestured toward the observation window, where the distant stars glittered against the cosmic darkness. Do you remember what you told me 15 years ago, when we first encountered those automated weapons platforms in the dead zones? The ones left over from some ancient war we still do not fully understand? Morrison's expression softened with memory. I said that the galaxy was far more dangerous than anyone on Earth realized. That we were lucky we encountered old weapon systems before we encountered active hostile species. That we needed to be ready not just to defend ourselves but to defend others who might lack the capability. You said something else, Chen prompted, something that shaped everything we have done since. I said that humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to unite against external threats, Morrison recalled. That what we needed was not just a strong military, but a philosophy of strength that others could embrace without fearing us. Exactly, Chen said. The Distributed Defense Initiative is not about humanity dominating galactic military affairs. It is about creating a framework where strength serves everyone equally. Yes, some species will be suspicious at first, but those suspicions will fade when they see the system working, when they benefit from enhanced security and coordinated response to threats. Morrison moved to sit in one of the observation room's chairs, her military bearing giving way to the weariness of someone who had just commanded a fleet in battle. You make it sound so simple, but politics is never simple, Wei. We have just painted a target on humanity's back. Every species that feels threatened by our revelation will begin working to counter us to limit our influence. Let them try, Chen said, her voice carrying quiet confidence. They will find that humanity's true strength is not our military fleet, impressive as it is. Our strength is our ability to adapt, to build alliances, to turn enemies into partners. Look at what happened today. The Kragoth came as invaders. They left as potential future allies. We achieved that not through destruction but through demonstration, showing them that cooperation serves them better than conflict. Morrison looked up at her friend, and a slight smile crossed her weathered features. You have been planning this exact conversation for years, have not you? Every word carefully chosen. Not every word, Chen admitted with a smile of her own. But yes, I have considered various scenarios. You needed to hear this from me directly, as a friend rather than as a diplomatic briefing. You need to believe that what we have started today will work, because your confidence will transmit to your officers, and through them to every crew member in the fleet. Belief is as important as tactical capability when undertaking something this ambitious. Before Morrison could respond, the observation room's communication panel chimed. Chen touched the acceptance button, and Prelate Thon's holographic image materialized before them. "Ambassador Chen, Admiral Morrison, forgive the interruption," the ancient Archeon said. "I thought you should be aware that the Council has been conducting emergency deliberations regarding today's events. We have reached several preliminary decisions that will be formally announced tomorrow, but I wanted to inform you privately first." Chen and Morrison exchanged glances before Chen responded. "We appreciate your courtesy, Prelate. What has the Council decided?" Prelate Thon's expression was difficult to read, a mixture of approval and concern. First, the Council formally recognizes humanity as a Tier 1 military power, placing Earth on equal standing with civilizations like the Creathians, Archeons, and Dorvians. This recognition comes with additional Council responsibilities and voting privileges. Morrison sat forward. "That is significant. Tier 1 status has not been granted to a new species in over 3 centuries. "Indeed," Thon agreed. "Second, the Council accepts in principle the framework of your distributed defense initiative. However, implementation will require extensive negotiation and planning. A special committee is being formed to explore the proposal in detail. Ambassador Chen, you will be invited to co-chair this committee alongside representatives from established military powers." Chen nodded slowly. This was better than she had expected. The Council could have rejected the proposal outright or delayed it indefinitely. Accepting it in principle and forming a committee meant they were taking the idea seriously. "And third?" she prompted, knowing there would be more. Prelate Thon hesitated, which was itself remarkable. Archeans were not known for hesitation. "Third, there is significant concern among several Council members about humanity's methods today. Specifically, the fact that you positioned a major military fleet without Council knowledge or oversight, then used the Kragoth crisis as a means to reveal your capabilities. Some members view this as manipulative. Some members," Morrison said carefully, "or specific members who feel their own positions have been undermined." "The distinction is relevant," Thon acknowledged. "I will speak plainly as I believe you both deserve honesty. The Creathian ambassador is furious, though he hides it well. He sees today as a deliberate humiliation, humanity allowing him to pontificate about your weakness while knowing you possessed overwhelming strength. The Dorvians are calculating whether humanity represents a long-term threat to their own influence. Several smaller species are worried that your hidden fleet means they cannot trust the intelligence they have gathered about any member species." Chen considered this, weighing her response carefully. "Tell me, Prelate, in your long experience, have you ever encountered a species that revealed all their capabilities immediately upon joining the galactic community?" Thon's ancient features creased with what might have been amusement. "No. Every species maintains secrets, hidden assets, strategic reserves they do not advertise, but most do so on a smaller scale than what humanity has revealed today. Because most species joined the Council from positions of established strength," Chen replied. "They were already recognized as powerful civilizations before making contact. Humanity joined as newcomers, a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. If we had revealed our military capabilities immediately, how would we have been received?" The prelate was silent for a long moment. Finally, he inclined his head. "Point taken, Ambassador. A young species revealing significant military strength would have been viewed as a potential threat rather than a..." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after the Kragoth withdrawal. The vast assembly chamber held representatives from 47 member species, each occupying designated areas suited to their environmental needs. Atmospheric barriers separated those who breathed oxygen from those who required methane or survived in vacuum. Translation systems hummed constantly, converting thousands of languages into comprehensible formats for all present. Ambassador Chen sat in the human delegation area with David Park beside her. Unlike the previous session, where she had positioned herself in the back, she now occupied a front-row seat, a symbolic change that every delegate understood. Humanity's status had shifted overnight from peripheral member to central player. The seating reflected that new reality. The Creathian ambassador, Ambassador Velkoth, rose to address the assembly. His crystalline skin had lost its earlier transparency, now glowing with determination. Esteemed colleagues, we gather today to discuss humanity's actions and their implications for Council operations. I will speak plainly, as the situation demands honesty. Yesterday, humanity demonstrated military capabilities that far exceed what they reported to Council intelligence. This represents a fundamental breach of trust between member species. Murmurs of agreement and disagreement rippled through the chamber. Chen remained motionless, her expression neutral. She had expected this attack and had prepared her response weeks ago. Velkoth continued, his voice gaining strength. The Council's security depends on accurate intelligence about member capabilities. How can we trust our defense planning if a species can conceal hundreds of warships from our oversight? What precedent does this set? Will every member now question whether their intelligence on other species is accurate? The Dorvian representative, whose name translated roughly as Keeper of Angles, added his support. His geometric shapes pulsed red with agitation. Ambassador Velkoth speaks truth. Humanity has undermined the foundation of mutual trust that sustains this council. They have demonstrated that a species can join us, be welcomed as partners, yet maintain massive secret military capabilities. This is unacceptable. Other delegates began voicing their positions. The debate quickly divided along predictable lines. Older established species tended to support the Crethean position, seeing humanity's secrecy as a threat to the existing order. Younger species and those who had felt marginalized by council politics expressed more sympathy for humanity's approach, seeing it as a clever strategy for a newcomer species to establish respect. After 30 minutes of increasingly heated debate, Prelate Thon activated his speaking privilege, commanding silence through sheer authority. Enough. We will hear from Ambassador Chen before continuing this discussion. The human delegation deserves an opportunity to address these concerns directly. Chen stood smoothly, moving to the central speaking platform. She took her time walking there, using those seconds to let the chamber settle into attentive silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and measured, carrying no defensiveness or apology. Ambassador Velkoth, Keeper of Angles, and all delegates who share their concerns, you are right to question humanity's methods. Secrecy does create uncertainty, and uncertainty can undermine trust. I do not deny this. She paused, letting that acknowledgement register. However, I would ask you all to consider the context of humanity's position when we joined this council 20 years ago. She activated a holographic display that showed Earth's solar system and the surrounding space. This is where humanity was when we achieved faster-than-light capability. We were alone, primitive by galactic standards, with no knowledge of the Council's existence. Within months of our first FTL test, we encountered automated defense platforms left over from some ancient conflict. These weapon systems nearly destroyed our exploration ships. We survived through luck and desperate improvisation. The display shifted, showing combat records from humanity's early encounters with ancient weapons, pirate fleets, and territorial disputes with pre-Council species. The footage was raw and visceral. Ships damaged, crew members dying, humanity fighting for survival in a galaxy that had proven hostile from the first moment of contact. We learned quickly that the galaxy is dangerous, Chen continued. When we finally encountered the Galactic Council and were invited to join, we faced a choice. We could reveal that we had spent 15 years building a military force capable of defending our interests, risking being perceived as aggressive newcomers. Or we could present ourselves as peaceful explorers, keeping our defensive capabilities in reserve until the time came when we could demonstrate them appropriately. Ambassador Velkoth's crystalline skin flickered with agitation. You manipulated Council perceptions deliberately. You made us believe you were weaker than you truly were. Yes, Chen agreed simply. The admission caused a ripple of shock through the assembly. She had not tried to soften it or deflect. We allowed you to underestimate us because we believed that was the safest path for a young species entering an established political order. Tell me, Ambassador Velkoth, if humanity had arrived 20 years ago with 300 warships and claimed we needed them for self-defense, how would the Council have responded? Velkoth hesitated, clearly understanding the trap in the question. If he said the Council would have welcomed humanity openly, he would be lying and everyone present would know it. If he admitted the Council would have viewed a heavily armed newcomer species with suspicion or hostility, He would validate humanity's strategic choice. The Vexian delegate, Ambassador Celine, broke the impasse. Her scales had settled into a thoughtful purple shade. I will answer since my colleague will not. The Council would have demanded extensive restrictions on human fleet movements, mandatory inspections, and limits on military expansion. We would have treated humanity as a potential threat rather than a potential partner. This is simply historical fact. We have done so with every militarily powerful species that has joined the Council. Chen inclined her head toward Celine, appreciating the honesty. Thank you, Ambassador. That is precisely the situation we sought to avoid. We wanted to join the galactic community as partners, not subjects. We wanted to contribute to Council security rather than being restricted by it. The path we chose, revealing our capabilities only when they could be demonstrated in defense of Council interests, achieved that goal. A delegate from a species Chen did not immediately recognize activated their speaking privilege. The translator rendered their bubbling liquid speech into standard language. Ambassador Chen, even accepting your reasoning, you have now revealed your fleet in a way that changes galactic politics fundamentally. The balance of military power has shifted. How do you expect us to respond to this shift? By embracing it, Chen replied without hesitation. The Distributed Defense Initiative I proposed yesterday is not a human attempt to dominate military affairs. It is a framework for transforming the revelation of our fleet into something beneficial for all Council members. Yes, humanity has significant military capability, but that capability, combined with the strengths of other species, creates a defensive network far stronger than any individual fleet. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show a tactical map of Council space, with proposed deployment positions for joint task forces. Imagine if the Kragoth fleet had encountered not just human ships, but coordinated task forces including Krethian tactical expertise, Dorvian computational analysis, Vexian stealth technology, and human adaptive strategy. The engagement would have been even more decisive, with fewer casualties and clearer demonstration of Council unity. The Keeper of Angles pulsed yellow with reluctant interest. You propose integrating our different military philosophies into unified operations. This has been attempted before and failed due to incompatible command structures and strategic doctrines. It has been attempted, Chen agreed, but it has never been attempted with humanity's coordinated jump capability as a force multiplier, or with the kind of comprehensive tactical integration we are proposing. The failures of the past do not dictate the limitations of the future. What we are suggesting is fundamentally different from previous attempts because it acknowledges and embraces differences rather than trying to homogenize military approaches. Park watched from the delegation seats as the chamber's mood began to shift. Chen was not defending humanity's secrecy. She was reframing it as a necessary step toward this moment, where revelation could be paired with a constructive proposal. It was masterful rhetoric, turning potential condemnation into an opportunity for transformation. Prelate Thon spoke again, his ancient voice carrying weight that silenced the murmuring delegates. Ambassador Chen, I have a question that goes to the heart of this matter. You have revealed significant military strength today, paired with a proposal to share that strength through integrated defense systems. But how can we trust that humanity will not use this position to advance your own interests at the expense of others? What guarantees can you offer? Chen turned to face the prelate directly. 6 months after the revelation at the Galactic Trade Summit, Ambassador Chen stood in a very different setting than the grand conference halls where she had spent most of her career. The observation deck of the joint training, facility-designated Station Unity offered a view of something unprecedented in galactic history, a mixed fleet conducting coordinated tactical exercises. 50 vessels moved through the designated training zone in perfect formation. Human destroyers flew alongside Krethian cruisers. Vexian stealth frigates coordinated with Dorvian analysis ships. Even 2 Kragoth heavy corvettes. Their participation, a diplomatic victory that had required months of negotiation, held position within the formation. The ships moved as one organism, executing maneuvers that would have been impossible without the extensive training protocols humanity had introduced. Simulation parameters initiating, announced Commander Torres, the human officer overseeing the exercise. Enemy force composition. 3 hostile dreadnoughts, 20 support vessels attempting to breach defensive perimeter around civilian convoy. Scenario begins in 30 seconds. Admiral Morrison stood beside Chen, watching the tactical displays with a critical eye. Behind them, representatives from 24 species observed the exercise, evaluating whether the distributed defense initiative was worth the massive investment of time and resources it required. "This is it," Morrison said quietly. 6 months of work comes down to the next 20 minutes. If this exercise fails, half those representatives will use it as justification to withdraw from the initiative. Chen nodded, her eyes never leaving the formation. Then it had better not fail. The simulation began. Hostile markers appeared on the tactical display, their approach vectors calculated to split the defending fleet's attention. It was a classic scenario, one that military commanders across the galaxy had studied for centuries. The standard response would be to divide forces, accepting that some enemy vessels would break through while the main battle group engaged the dreadnoughts. But the mixed fleet did not follow standard doctrine. The formation shifted, ships moving with precision that spoke to hundreds of hours of joint training. Human vessels executed a synchronized micro-jump, repositioning to bracket the enemy dreadnoughts. Simultaneously, Krethian cruisers moved to intercept the support vessels, their heavy shields absorbing simulated fire while Vexian frigates used their stealth capabilities to approach undetected. The Dorvian analysis ships fed tactical data to all fleet elements in real time, creating a shared battlefield awareness that allowed each ship to respond to threats before they fully developed. The Kregoth corvettes, positioned initially as reserves, suddenly accelerated forward. They punched through the enemy formation at maximum speed, their heavy armor absorbing simulated damage while creating chaos in the hostile ranks. It was a characteristically aggressive Kregoth tactic, but executed with perfect timing that created openings for the other fleet elements to exploit. 16 minutes after the scenario began, the last simulated enemy vessel was destroyed. The defending fleet had lost 3 ships, acceptable casualties for the scenario's difficulty level. More importantly, the civilian convoy they were protecting remained completely intact. The observation deck erupted in discussion. Some representatives looked impressed. Others appeared skeptical, questioning whether simulated battles proved anything about real combat performance. Chen let them talk, knowing that what happened next would be more significant than any words she could offer. The holographic display shifted, showing analysis data compiled by the exercise computers. Comparative statistics appeared, contrasting the mixed fleet's performance against historical data from similar scenarios executed by single-species forces. The numbers were undeniable. The mixed fleet had completed the scenario 23% faster than the average single-species fleet. Casualty rates were 40% lower. Resource expenditure was reduced by 31%. But the most striking data showed tactical adaptability scores. The mixed fleet had responded to emerging threats an average of 12 seconds faster than historical comparisons, a difference that could mean the distinction between victory and defeat in real combat. Ambassador Velkoth, who had become Chen's co-chair on the working group despite their earlier tensions, studied the data with his analytical mind. His crystalline skin glowed with colors that indicated deep thought. "These results are impressive, Ambassador Chen. However, I must note that simulation parameters can be adjusted to favor certain tactical approaches. How do we know this scenario was not designed to showcase the mixed fleet's strengths while minimizing its potential weaknesses?" It was a fair question, and Chen had anticipated it. Ambassador Velkoth, the scenario parameters were designed by a committee that included representatives from your own military strategists, as well as observers from neutral species not participating in the initiative. We specifically requested that they create scenarios highlighting potential weaknesses in mixed species coordination. What you witnessed was the mixed fleet overcoming those design challenges, not avoiding them. A representative from the Helian Confederation, a species known for their cautious approach to military affairs, activated their speaking device. Their voice came through the translator as a series of melodic tones. Even accepting these results, Ambassador Chen, we must acknowledge that this is still a controlled exercise. How will this mixed fleet perform when facing a real threat, when lives are actually at stake and communication delays or equipment failures can occur? Morrison stepped forward, her military bearing commanding attention. That is a question that cannot be answered definitively until the mixed fleet faces actual combat. However, I can tell you that every exercise we have conducted has included randomized equipment failures, communication disruptions, and unexpected scenario modifications. The fleet commanders and crews have learned to adapt to unpredictability because that is what real combat requires. She gestured toward the observation window, where the mixed fleet was reforming for a second exercise. But more importantly, consider what we have accomplished in just 6 months. Species that have never coordinated military operations before are now functioning as a unified force. Language barriers have been overcome through universal tactical protocols. Different strategic philosophies have been integrated into a coherent operational doctrine. If we can achieve this in half a year, imagine what will be possible after a year, or 5 years, or a decade. The Helian representative's melodic tones carried a note of approval. You speak persuasively, Admiral. I cannot deny that what I have witnessed today exceeds my expectations. However, my government will require more than impressive exercises before committing our forces to this initiative. Of course, Chen said smoothly. That is why we are proposing a phased implementation approach. The working group has developed a plan that allows species to participate at different levels, based on their comfort and readiness. Some may only contribute observerships initially. Others may commit full squadrons immediately. The goal is flexible participation that grows organically as trust and capability develop. David Park, who had spent the past 6 months serving as Chen's primary assistant on the working group, activated a presentation that outlined the phased implementation plan. The holographic display showed a timeline stretching across 5 years, with escalating levels of integration and expanding participation goals. Phase 1 focuses on establishing baseline interoperability, Park explained, his confidence grown significantly since the initial summit. Species that join during this phase commit to adopting universal communication protocols and participating in quarterly joint exercises. No operational deployments required, purely training and familiarization. Phase 2 introduces limited operational deployment, he continued. Mixed squadrons begin conducting patrol duties in agreed-upon sectors. These are low-risk assignments designed to build real-world coordination experience without exposing participants to significant danger. Phase 3 establishes permanent joint task forces with rotating command structures. By this point, participating species have developed sufficient trust and capability to undertake more complex operations, including rapid response to emerging threats. The presentation continued through phases 4 and 5, each building on the previous foundation, until reaching a vision of fully integrated defensive networks spanning council space. Ambassador Celine, the Vexian delegate whose support had been crucial during the initial debate, studied the timeline carefully. Her scales shifted to an interested green shade. This approach has merit. It allows us to test the concept incrementally rather than committing fully from the beginning. My government may find this acceptable. Throughout the observation deck, Chen could see representatives reassessing their positions. The combination of demonstrated capability in the exercises and a reasonable implementation plan was shifting opinions. Species that had been skeptical were now considering participation. Those already committed were becoming advocates. Prelate Thon, who had traveled to Station Unity specifically to observe this day's exercises, finally spoke. His ancient voice carried weight that commanded immediate attention.